Welcome to Adapted, the podcast where we explore adaptations of various forms. I'm today's host, Tom, and with me is...
Pat.
Today we'll be discussing Shakespeare's As You Like It from circa 1599, as well as Kenneth Branagh's 2006 film version. And so today, last time, which was 2 weeks ago, not last time, 2 times ago. So 2 weeks ago, we were talking about rehearsals, and I looked up some stuff about rehearsals to kind of fill this in.
Oh yeah, I was curious about this. Tom teaches moment.
Yes. So I found this from Tiffany Stern's book, and she has a book called Rehearsals.
Tom teaches theater. Sorry.
Not at all. I actually do that as a day job, so it's
Tom teaches theater.
Yeah, though my students don't seem to be as enthusiastic as you are. But anyway, so this is from Tiffany Stern's book, Rehearsals from Shakespeare to Sheridan, which is an excellent book. And the point Stern emphasizes with regards to the 1590s starts is that dozens of plays were retained by a company over a 12-month period. Very few plays lasted longer than a year, but they had a few dozen plays on hand for any given day. And so using Henslow's diary, Philip Henslow's diary that we covered in an earlier episode, she predicts that a troupe would have around 30 plays in their head ready to go and would learn a new role about every 2 weeks. And the rehearsals were really nothing like today. Players would rehearse in the morning before they begun the process of preparing for the afternoon show. There's some debate as to when the rehearsals ended. Some say 2, just before the playhouse opened. We actually have a few testimonials to this from people at that time, like diary entries and letters. But others say that audience members were coming in all day, so the rehearsals would have to have ended long before 2 o'clock, because the theater was filling up like over a period of a few hours. There's a letter from a guy, Sir Henry Wotton, who testifies to this, who was like, yeah, he came in very early in the day and a bunch of people just kind of mull around in the theater. The time between a company buying a play and putting it on varied from 3 days to 51, according to the diary, with the average time being about 20 days. This is when you bought it to when you put it on. Though typically, we should remember troops were typically working on acquiring far more than one play within those 20 days. So you just weren't working on one play. Almost every new play would be put on. So if you bought it, you were going to put it on. Writers would start by selling a company a plot. So you'd get the actual outline of the story. Then there was a small private reading. Then the company would come together and the company would read, at which point the parts were handed out. Usually the larger parts first. A part, which actually the script was just the part, just the lines the actor needed to learn, and the cue line, nothing else. And so that's where you get the part. It was literally cut out of the thing and given to the actor. Since no one on stage knew the entire scene, you had a prompter out there. You actually saw this in the Laurence Olivier Henry V. There was a prompter out there on the side. And he actually helped during the performances, and this seems to be a thing that people accepted just fine. That's why you see a lot of repetitions in speeches, because you'd see a cue usually repeated earlier. Shakespeare does this a lot, and that really was there to help the actors. Like, your cue is coming, start paying attention, because they otherwise had no idea. And this is all the more necessary because if you want to talk about the average amount of rehearsals for a play, it was somewhere between 1 and 0. One group rehearsal seems to have been pretty common. You had people, maybe main actors, working on things, but very often you could have 0 group rehearsals. And the morning rehearsal would be for older plays, rehashing older plays that seemed to be popular again because some other theater company was putting them on. These single rehearsals, however, were really important. Henslow records really stiff fines if anyone missed. So if you missed, you were charged a fine, and that apparently included the playwright. So the playwright had to attend. But the evidence suggests that once everyone knew their parts, that was it. You were done. You knew your rehearsal. maybe you would go over entrances and exits. If you had dances or fights, you would go over that. But the sort of thing we think of working out your character or whatnot just wasn't a thing in the early modern period. These plays appear to have been rehearsed in the backstage area, which would kind of help explain maybe that people wandering into the theater and not seeing the actors. But the backstage area was really, really small, so you probably weren't working on full performances. It was probably just the actors working out their lines or what have you. There was a special room in St. John's Palace in London where the Master of Revels could see his own private rehearsals, and there you go. That was a thing. In terms of direction, the manager was not a director, even though the manager was an acting teacher. The manager was a business manager mostly, who also taught acting. The evidence seems to suggest that actually the prompter worked as a sort of ad hoc director. He offered some lessons, and Stern infers this more than proves this from certain plays, not Shakespeare plays, but other early modern plays, where there's sort of metaphors about how how I won't listen to the prompter this time on this, things like that, that indicate, well, that must mean something. I guess the prompter is instructing these people. The prompter was also responsible apparently for editing the text based upon the needs or the advice of the actors. And we have some prompt books where there's things crossed out and actually the notes and the names of the actors who supply the notes. It seems like with the smaller roles, the roles that weren't handed out in parts, those were also cast by the prompter, probably. Or the prompter made suggestions. We have cast books, we have the full play-length manuscript with suggestions for characters written in. Sir Thomas More is an example of this. If you know this, this is the play that Shakespeare worked on. We proved later that Shakespeare worked on little bits and pieces of it. And in that manuscript, we have little notes from the prompter saying this person should play this role for the bit roles, for the smaller roles, not the roles that the company shares would do. But yeah, and again, the theater troupe wasn't doing that role. It seems to like a director didn't seem to be a big deal. It just seemed to be a necessary evil. But people like James Burbage, who was the manager of the Lord Chamberlain's Men, later the King's Men, he did offer acting instruction. And the history of acting in the 17th century is really interesting. It's sort of a heritage thing.
How many performances did they do? Do you have any idea? Like in a week, let's say. How many
Oh, in a
would a
week, I think they
theater
did.
troupe do?
I think they did 6 days a
Oh,
week.
they did. Okay.
I
Yeah,
think
so
yeah,
it's a
they
lot.
did 6 days a week, and they had time off for the Easter season. The Easter season, it was not allowed to put on plays. I think from I think the 40 days of Easter, you just
Yeah.
didn't do that. That wasn't allowed. Though I believe indoor theater was still allowed, so you could go to the Blackfriars. Blackfriars was in the winter, so around December to February, March. That's when you were indoors. And I think that was also 6 days a week, though Blackfriars tickets were much more expensive. They had less than half the audience, so the ticket prices reflected that. So I don't know if they were quite as frequent. But yeah, you would do 6 days a week.
Cool.
Yeah. It seems like it was a rough business. But
No.
anyway, I can't imagine seeing like people always kind of fantasize about going back and seeing like an original Richard Burbage Hamlet or something. I imagine it was awful. I imagine like when you read about like yeah, the prompter was kind of telling them what to do during the performance. You're like, I
But
I
they
think
must have
maybe
been, I mean, they must have been wildly popular, though, clearly. I mean, people were paying a lot of money. There's a lot of these things going on if they're doing them 6 days a week,
oh yeah, yeah,
you
they
know.
were pop and they continued to be. I think we probably my guess is that they weren't as unnatural as they tend to be thought of sometimes. Because we have people talking about actors and from the early modern period, and they're always like, don't saw your hand too much, right? In
Yeah.
Hamlet, so there is a kind of stress on naturalism, but there's a lot of acting books we see, especially a little later in the 17th century, when there are acting books. There's no acting books before that, where there is this sort of like the
The
gesture
gesture.
makes
It's
the
always the gesture.
emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now
It's very
part of
Michael Chekhov. Wasn't that
yeah, it
the
is.
thing? Yeah.
Yeah, it is
But
Michael
that's, I mean,
Chekhov.
you hear it a lot though. Like, I mean, I've seen a number of them where they talk about and they'll be like his gestures and his voice, the way, and it's just like the way he moved his hand and spoke. it elicited the, the emotion of sadness, and there was this, that seems to have been the idea. I mean, maybe it works. I don't know. I've never seen anybody do it.
Yeah,
I don't think it's
I
just like, it almost kind of has like a, not a kabuki theater, but having watched even the thing in this thing, there's almost this kind of exaggerated motion kind of thing that is that more what was going on, but mm,
there's a book from, and I'll look this up for next time. I don't remember the exact year. I think it is actually, I think it's 1680s, 1690s, which is sort of acting lessons, but it's based on studies of deaf people. And very often the book for a long time was just taken as acting lessons. I think scholars maybe took too much out of it, but there's a sort of there's this gesture, and you actually could see illustrations in the book of these gestures, chromotagia, I think it's called, and there's performances. I know I haven't seen it, but a friend of mine saw a performance where they did all of those gestures in the performance. They tried to base it on that book, and they said it was much more like watching a dance, like a
yeah,
very
that's
light
what it sort of
dance.
seems like. It sort of has this performative aspect to it.
Yeah,
That, yeah, might have been a bit bit weird. But I mean, I guess it's, I mean, I don't know. I would love to know, like, did people who watched, because there is something interesting, like, you see, especially when you see some of these, the Globe Theater ones, where there's this sense that, the groundlings were a bit rambunctious, and there's this sense of like, okay, I can see how the comedies sort of worked. But, Hamlet or Lear or these other ones, like, did they get to the end of Lear and sort of was there like sort of hushed silence as they watched this? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I
was
mean,
it like,
all of the plays ended with a dance, so I
well,
like
yeah,
Lear
but
jumped up and danced. But yeah, before that, you mean? Yeah.
you know what I mean? I mean, was this like,
They
were
would
people
have to, though. I mean, like you think of Lear, like he's holding the feather over her mouth as she's dying, and he's like,
dying?
he thinks, well, she's dead. She's not even dying; she's dead.
Yeah, I know,
And
I
he's like,
know. Oh,
oh,
she's dead. Yeah,
yeah. He's like, oh, it's moving. She's alive. She's alive. He gets excited. It's like really heartbreaking, and I can't
yeah,
imagine a bunch of like, it's just us with our evolved sense of emotion. Like,
yeah,
I
and that's
just,
what I mean. I'm assuming that people were deeply moved by these. Like, you have to assume that they were.
yeah.
Uh, and that's I wonder, was it like people watching, I don't know, Breaking Bad or something? Was it like, tonight I want to go see a drama today. I'm gonna go watch that, and then they switch from that to Friends the next day. Like, is that sort of the
Yeah, I think so.
idea of what's going
A
on?
lot of the rep stuff seems to be a reflection of the duopoly. So it's, oh, we got to put on a history play because they're selling a lot of tickets to Henry V, so we have to put it on our Henry V. It's that seems to be
Yeah,
more the thing.
that's it's the Dante's Peak volcano thing,
Yeah,
or
exactly. Yeah, we talked about this before.
yeah, or the
Um,
one where the two ones where they attack the White House. It's just like, it's just
yeah,
ants and bugs life. It's just they just
yeah,
keep doing it.
yeah. That's nothing new. That seems to be it. I don't see anything of like, oh, we've been putting on a lot of tragedies lately. We need to do a comedy. I think a lot of it seemed to also be driven by titles. Like this title seems to be the type of thing that's popular. But I don't know if there's a pattern of like comedy, 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 tragedy, comedy, 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 tragedy, That would actually be interesting.
Yeah,
I will
I
look
would
into
love
that.
to know, yeah, what the sequences were. And again, I don't know how much we have of just like, yeah, your average person, or just anybody who, sort of like the Samuel Pepyses of the world looking down, and he tends to be very condescending. And so is he looking down at sort of the groundlings and commenting on how they're reacting to a tragic scene or something like that. I would be very curious to know how that how that works, or how
Yeah.
it worked. I'm sure there's probably not that much about it, but it
Mhm.
would just be really interesting because, yeah, there's no way you could get to the end of some of these plays and not have been moved by them if you
Mhm.
were paying attention at all and they were being competently performed. So it's just really interesting to sort of imagine this idea of people who had been throwing tomatoes and fruit at actors earlier, watching this sort of sequence here. I find it very interesting. I would love to know that, but
Yeah.
we haven't even got to the play. We're just
Well,
talking about random topics that we don't know anything about.
anyway, well, not quite random. I think it's somewhat related.
I mean, they're
Um,
related, but I
it's
guess it's sort
related.
of
Yeah,
like,
it's a little tangential regardless. But we should get into As You Like It, which I will say this is my favorite comedy. I agree that Festi is a better clown than Touchstone. However, I think this is the richest comedy just in terms of the female lead. I don't think she's quite as dynamic as Beatrice, but she's really close. And on top of that, there is just this collection of characters who all get these
It's
kind
the
of
best characters,
moments.
yeah.
Yeah.
Every character. There's no character in this one. I will agree with your assessment. I think I might like Twelfth Night more, but that might just be because I was in this play and so I know it. The sort of too well. Like the familiarity breeds contempt kind of thing. It's probably now. I get why your argument against Midsummer or, no, or against Much Ado sort of convinced me that yeah, the subplot is completely worthless and not interesting at all, and many of the characters are boring and stock. This doesn't have that problem. I will agree with that.
No. And it's part of it is they just get rid of plot. It's like once they go into the woods, there's really no, there's no plot.
There's nothing going
Yeah,
on.
there's
Yeah.
no dramatic. It's not like, oh no, he's not going to get Rosalind. She just has to tell him, oh no, it's me. That's it. Then they're ready.
There's
Um,
no reason for her not to,
yeah,
really.
she's just, well, her reason is she has to train him. He's an idiot. He writes the worst poetry in the world. And he's like, oh, dude, you can't, we gotta fix you up. He's a fixer-upper. That's
He's a
what
fixer
Orlando
upper.
is.
Although, I mean, the
But he's a
thing
good
is
guy.
he's a good guy. But that's I guess my thing with him is he's not quite as stupid as whatever his name is,
Claudio?
Lackbeard, and yeah, Claudio Lackbeard, my Lord Lackbeard.
Hmm.
Um, he's not quite as stupid as him. He's just sort of naive,
Hmm.
maybe. Um, but even then, I mean, the whole thing is there's this notion of, oh, he needs to learn how to love and he needs to learn that, and then sort of suffer for his love. But part of me is I'm like, Rosalind doesn't really she does the same thing. Like she sees him and is like, I love him. Like
Hmm.
what makes her the expert on this matter? I just find it a little odd. That's always
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the differences you could see with expression, he is much worse at expressing himself than she is,
yeah,
right?
that's true. That's what his whole thing. He can't speak and yeah, he
Mhm.
stammers and yeah.
And his poetry is awful. That's another thing. Like
Well,
if
I
Shakespeare
mean, yeah.
has a character writing,
For Shakespeare, it's like, oh, his poetry is awful. That means he has to learn how to be a poet before he
well, it
can
means
love.
he's kind of he's a little bit of full of hot air, which
Yeah,
doesn't
he's
mean
full.
that's
Yeah,
not coming from a genuine place or he doesn't have genuine virtues, but she isn't. She's a lot smarter than him.
let's put it this way: Benedict is a terrible poet too because
Hmm.
he comes up with his babbling rhymes
Yeah.
and his I can find no rhyme for lady but baby.
But it's part of the same model. I think
Yeah,
Benedict's a lot more fun than Orlando, and I think he's wittier. But it's the
yeah,
same idea. I mean, Beatrice is smarter than Benedict. She just is.
yeah.
And this is the same thing here. It's just instead of starting from a place of contempt, it's more of a Juliet Romeo thing where it's like, oh, okay, this you have to calm the hell down and grow up. Or maybe not calm down. You have to grow up a little
You have to
bit.
grow up.
And with Romeo, it's you have to stop being 14 years old and falling in love with everyone. With Orlando, it's you have to learn how to say things. You have to learn how to articulate your emotion because that's effectively what we are. I mean, they're characters in a play,
Yeah,
and I think it's yeah, and I think that works really well. And when she describes her love for him, it's when she's talking to Cecilia about it, it's as bottomless as the sea of Portugal. I mean, it's just far her metaphors are far richer and it's just far more thick, right? She just has deeper feeling because she has better articulatory powers, and I think that's why she's justified in quote unquote teaching him. That would be my argument.
yeah. I
Or
mean, I would agree that that's the sort of literary convention that's being applied here. As we said, though, that plot wise, there's nothing.
there's no
It's
plot.
not the same. But I guess that's the thing is like it's not the same as the plot in say Much Ado, where there actually is something that has to be sort of overcome, which is their antipathy toward one another. You actually that has to be overcome, or this relationship cannot progress. I don't know. Could their relationship progress if Orlando still didn't wrote bad poetry? Like,
Oh yeah,
what I mean? That's what I mean.
yeah. That's
So
not
there's no
necessary.
plot.
Yeah,
There's no necessity here
yeah.
for this thing to occur. There's more of a testing, I think,
Mhm.
that's going on to some extent.
Yeah,
Um,
it feels more, I think you said this before, it feels more platonic than dramatic.
yeah,
A lot of
this is
Shakespeare's,
more of a dialogue. Yeah,
yeah, I
there's
think you
some of them
mentioned that
just have
about
more.
Timon of Athens. Timon of
Yeah,
Athens.
Time of Athens is 100% that. Like there was literally zero drama in Time of Athens in the second half of it. It's actually a really interesting play. I've enjoyed going through them all. But there's literally zero action. Nothing happens in it. It feels like a platonic dialogue. But that's interesting, but it's not dramatic. But this kind of has a similar quality. There's nothing, although it's not as bad as Time of Athens. But there's nothing happens. They just kind of talk and they express wit, and it's fun to watch them and entertaining, funny, and we just sit and watch them for 3 acts do that. And that's fine.
Yeah,
Um,
but and it has some of the kind of philosophical exchanges, especially with between Touchstone, Jaques, and Rosalind.
yeah.
They have a conversation about what is it you do, Jaques? You kind of walk around the world and be mellow and try and observe it and learn about it. Is this a valuable use of your time?
It fascinates me how frequently Shakespeare recycles his ideas. Like there's a lot of things that clearly interest him that he just continually brings up in plays in different forms. It's sort of it's as if he had like 5 or 6 ideas that he was really interested in, and he just constantly was recycling them, trying to figure them out. In the tragedies, it's often the how it's the idea of misplaced trust, trusting someone that you shouldn't trust, or neglected recognition of not superiority necessarily, but of benevolence. And so someone who says, I owe this person something, but I'm not going to give it to them, and then them getting their revenge. Like he does it, every tragedy almost boils down, except for Romeo and Juliet, because I don't think it's a tragedy. But every other one almost always boils down to that to some extent. It's fascinating to watch him do that. But the comedies have the same sort of conceit of sort of this idea of how does one express love, and how do I properly know whether someone's love is love or just infatuation? Like he sort of, and he just kind of constantly recycles this idea over and over and over again. It's really, I find that interesting how often, if you really look at them, they kind of boil down to very similar questions and processes that he's
Yeah,
looking at through different lenses.
yeah, that's true. Because Midsummer is about that. Midsummer is about infatuation.
Yeah.
And granted, I guess for some of the characters, the infatuation never goes away, but I guess it just turns into love, and oh well, that's fine.
Well,
Um,
it's also an early comedy for him.
mm,
He's looking at the concept, but I don't think he knows what to do with it yet.
mhm.
Like he
He
knows
doesn't know
this
how to
isn't.
elevate it.
Yeah, he doesn't know how to elevate it. I mean, you can look at say Comedy of Errors. Comedy of Errors. I mean, there's basically none of that really in there. That's just a slamming doors comedy. But it it that's his just like I'm just gonna learn how to write funny stuff and how to entertain people. Midsummer seems to be one of his. It's still sort of a slamming doors comedy, just
Mhm.
with juice on their eyes and them sort of suddenly having to shift. And it's sort of a more complicated way of looking at the same problem as Comedy of Errors. And then you get these ones here where he's really Twelfth Night or this or As You Like It, where he's really trying to figure out how do you determine love versus infatuation.
Mhm.
This one I remember when we did it, it was always like there's multiple relationships here, and each one represents a different level. Eventually, Rosalind and Orlando's love is sort of the true love, the one that's sort of fully recognized, fully fleshed out. They've
Mhm.
tested each other, they've determined their love. Then you get the brother and the Cecilia. What's
Yeah,
the brother's name?
Oliver.
Oliver. And is it Cecilia? Celia? Celia. And Celia, is it Celia?
I thought it was Cecilia. Let me look.
Is it Cecilia? I can't remember. Um, but they're sort of like the infatuation. They truly love each other, but there's sort of this idea of is it real, or is it just they've seen each other, they love, but there's what is sort of the the depth of it. It's untested. You have Touchstone and Phoebe, who are the is it Phoebe? No, Phoebe's the other one. Touchstone
Audrey.
and Audrey. Touchstone and Audrey, who are just lust. There's just that's all they want to do. And then you have Phoebe and the shepherd dude,
Mhm,
uh,
Sylvius.
Sylvius, and they're sort of the just they kind of hate each other and they're just stuck together for But there's sort of this idea of the different levels of love. Someday I could probably write an article and compare this to like the parable of the sower. I bet there's something there. But this idea though that love takes root, it has to be tested, it has to go through something, and it has to sort of emerge victorious. And that's what he's exploring with all of these things. But it's fascinating that these ideas are all there. They're all there in his earlier comedies. He just doesn't get, to your point, he doesn't know how to elevate it. He doesn't know what to do with it. He doesn't know how to talk about it. But he just keeps going he just keeps going back to it. And it's sort of like, do it again, but better this time.
Yeah.
There's this element to it, which I find really interesting because there's what something must have preoccupied him. Maybe it was his situation with his
Yeah,
wife.
his wife, who he wasn't too probably fond of, as we know.
Yeah,
And
but
it's interesting they go into Arden Forest, named for his mother, in order to work
oh, I
this
didn't know that.
out. Yeah, there is no Arden Forest. This is,
Well, I
I
mean, I
mean,
know there, yeah.
yeah, we don't know that he deliberately named it after his mother's maiden name, but
Oh, I didn't know that that was his mother's maiden name. Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
hmm
Oh, Freud would have loved
yeah, I
it.
was about to say.
Yeah, Freud would have loved that.
Freud, he probably did. He probably wrote something very
If
annoying
he
about
knew
it.
it, I don't know if he knew. But I guess they
Mm.
probably knew it because they know everything about Shakespeare these days. But I mean, he does it though a lot. I mean, Hamnet and Hamlet. He clearly
Mm.
pulls a lot of these names and things from his personal life. Uh,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
but
He's
there's just something really interesting when you read them all to see. It's the same thing. The only other author I've ever done this with is Eugene O'Neill, and Eugene O'Neill does it a lot too. You just see it's the same idea that was just there was a fixation that they had, and they just kept going back to it over and over and over again, trying to figure out how to express it properly.
or Faulkner. Faulkner has this
Faulkner,
idea
similar, yeah.
of yes, this sort of this inexpressible love that ends up landing in your own family. That type of thing keeps happening in Faulkner, and that kind of confusion with gentility and gentlemanness and all this stuff. Yeah, I suppose if you're one of these great geniuses, it's yeah, you're just kind of obsessed with this with a concept or
With the
something. You
concept
have to
and an
work it
idea.
out. Yeah, and with Shakespeare, he has the kind of the talent, obviously, to populate this concept with different types of people. Even if some of the people are recognizable from other plays, they're still unique people, and therefore, you could kind of work out this concept. I remember science fiction writers talking about this. It's they come up with this interesting world, or a fantasy writer will come up with an interesting world, and just like, well, what would that be like for this type of person to go through this world? How about this type of person? And that, based upon what you're saying here, it's kind of hierarchy of concern and what have you. Midsummer is this kind of magical world, even though it technically existed at one point. Much Ado is this, fun world. You're taking these kind of imaginary spaces, these almost kind of fantasy spaces, and being like, okay, let's populate them with these characters. But the fantasy space serves to, as you're saying, deal with this kind of idea of infatuation versus love, as opposed to, what if elves exist, or
Yeah.
something like that. It's kind of a thematic fantasy as opposed to a sort of physical fantasy, I guess. I think another thing I really like about this play, another reason why I like this play more than any of the other comedies is, again, I'd say like the multiplicity of characters in it. And I was looking at some things he was doing with these minor characters like Adam or Oliver, who are very small characters. Oliver is the
Well, even the Oliver, I mean, Oliver normally in the Shakespeare character would be the John the Bastard or
Mhm.
those kind of characters where it's just like, I am a villain. I don't apologize for being a villain, and I will just be a villain and run away at the end. And their plot device is just to make sure things go badly. And he could he normally would do that with Oliver. But I think he's matured as a playwright enough at this point that he doesn't do that with Oliver.
He doesn't do that, and this is sort of Deus Ex Machina tiger, I guess, that fixes this problem for them.
Yeah, well, there's a snake first, and then there's the
Oh
tiger.
yeah, okay. Yes, right.
There's the
Deus.
snake, which is like, why did you do that? But yeah, there's the snake that's about to bite him, and then he kills the snake first, and then after he's killed the snake, then the lion shows up,
There's got
which
to be a
is
metaphor or some sort of
well,
illusion in there, but I.
but did,
But why? Yeah.
why?
But well, the thing I liked about Oliver too is early on in Act One, there's this scene where Oliver is explaining why that he hates his brother, and how he doesn't really understand it. And it's this really, it's a little monologue, but it's really interesting because he's sort of, and this is something Shakespeare does in tragedies really well. Oliver is sort of overhearing himself discover who he is and why he does things, even if he can't fully explain it. There's this sort of this thing that critics call overhearing, and he's doing this. He's figuring out who he is and making decisions and changing based upon the things he's telling himself. And for a character that isn't as advanced as Oliver, he doesn't have that much to do in this play. He's like you said, he's like Don John, right? He's
Yeah.
normally wouldn't be that advanced. Like you normally wouldn't have a scene like that. And then later in the tragedies, you have lots of scenes like that with more than just the tragic hero. And so this also seems to be in part maybe a sort of bridge into the grand tragedies as well, when you start to see more of
I
this
can see that,
overhearing
yeah.
process. Yeah, I thought it was really fascinating to read that. I'd forgotten about that little speech. And it's not like particularly rhetorically memorable. It's just, oh, this is something he does later on. This is something we're going to see him do in Hamlet. And that was really compelling. And then another like Adam, who apparently Shakespeare played. So the tradition is Shakespeare played Adam, the old man. And that scene where he is like, but at fourscore it is too late a week, yet fortune that cannot recompense me better than to die well. That scene where he's like looking at his home and
Yeah.
it's like, I'm
Yeah,
too old,
I've lived here for this one. Yeah.
and I have to move on now. That's it's a little bit. It's a little tiny blurb, and you don't even need Adam. Like he could just be lifted out of the play, and Orlando just meets the Duke and's like, "Can I have some food?" as opposed to threatening him for Adam, whatever. But it's a lovely little scene, right? It's a lovely little bit, and the play is filled with things like that. I think that's why I like it. And then of course we get to the really interesting character like Jaques, who I am not entirely sure what to make of him. To be honest, he's a malcontent, right? So he's got too much
He's the
black bile.
anti-romantic force. He's the anti like and not in that he's trying to stop anyone, but he's the one where you can't have a party with Jaques around. He's
Mhm.
just gonna complain about everything. You can't even eat meat. He's just gonna
Yeah.
complain about it. You can't do anything with him around. So you gotta get rid of those guys. Like I think that's sort of what's going on with this. It's just I don't know if this is like the Puritan, it's his commenting on Puritanism or something. It's just this idea, but he's not going to get into that directly. But there's just this idea of just stop whining. Like it's fine. Like we don't. You can think it, but then move on. Like
Yeah.
that's sort of what I feel like he's doing a little bit here.
It may be that. I mean, the Puritan thing tends to be, you see them a lot. Like the most famous Puritan is Zeal of the Land Busy from Bartholomew Fair by Ben Jonson. And the idea with the Puritans, they tend to be hypocrites. It's like in that play, the whole thing is, I will not go to the fair because they're serving pork, and that's hedonistic. And then he's like, I will go to the fair and eat the pork to show everyone I'm not a Jew. And and that's his hypocrisy. Jake Weiss isn't a hypocrite in
No,
all.
but I guess that's the thing is maybe
Mm,
Shakespeare is, and I don't know if that's the exact. I don't think he's
mm,
actually going exactly at Puritanism directly, but just that mindset, just this mindset that just sort of wants to wallow in sadness and this, and it's like,
mm.
yeah, I mean, you can do that, but then move on.
Mhm.
There does seem to be a little bit of that. That this is just this type of force cannot coexist with romance. It can't coexist with this kind of thing. It's an anti-social force of a certain sort.
Yeah, it's too much thinking, right? Because he goes away to dwell with the monastics and just
Yeah.
like think in the woods, which is never good. You never want to go into the woods with Catholics and just think all the time. And so there seems to be this kind of like anti-knowledge thing going on, or a concern with too much knowledge, which is what Rosalind calls him out about when she one-ups him in their scene together. You know, that you sold all your lands to go look around at stuff. You could have looked at your own lands and not had to travel, right? There seems to be a somewhat concern with intellectuals and intellectualism, which would make sense in Shakespeare's own history, but also, yeah, that seems to be a big part of it. And something I noticed too was
Shakespeare
the
was a Catholic, though, so
yeah,
I
yes,
understand you.
exactly. He was a yeah. I've
Just
had a
look at his plays. The
lot of
proof is in his plays.
I've had a lot of people
To
try and
quote James
insist.
Tyrone,
Oh
he was a
yeah,
Catholic.
yeah.
Look at his plays. The proof is in his plays.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not convinced, but yeah, whatever. He's also Elizabeth the First because, yeah. But who is the person who's always accused of being Shakespeare? There's
I don't
one. I think it's
remember.
maybe the Earl of
There's a particular,
Oxford.
it's a particular earl, I think, or something
Yeah,
like that.
I think
Yeah.
it was. I remember, I think it's the Earl of Oxford because they're like, well, the Earl of Oxford is the only person knowledgeable enough because he got a degree from Oxford. And there was one scholar who's like, how he has an honorary degree from Oxford. He doesn't have an, he didn't finish his education. He has an honorary degree. How hard would it be for the Earl of Oxford to get an honorary degree from Oxford?
It's
But
more, I mean, I think my thing is somebody had it recently and they were like, it wasn't from contemporary, it was probably from like 20 or 30 years later, but it was essentially from the equivalent of like Stratford upon Avon from their grammar school. And it was an exam or something, a test they had to take. And they showed it and it was like, I mean, it was insane. Like in the things, and it was like this was meant for like 9-year olds, and it was just like if they were expecting 9-year olds to learn, this type of stuff, then yeah, Shakespeare could have written these.
yeah,
I think that was sort of just as like
yeah.
but they weren't learning math. They're not doing a lot of the other stuff we were doing. They were doing like, oh, we're gonna learn the Aeneid. We're gonna read we're gonna read Virgil. We're
You
gonna read
learn Greek and Latin.
yeah, metamorphoses. Yeah, we're gonna read Greek because you can tell, he's read Greek tragedies. He's read them. He makes numerous references to them all over the place, and he's clearly read his Latin and he's read his Ovid. So that's what he was doing, and that's just he's got an incredible literary education.
Mhm. Yeah, there's usually an Oxford or Cambridge person was probably teaching him. So,
Yeah.
yeah. But regardless, with Jaques, something I noticed too was Jaques' seven stages of
Yeah.
human being thing. That's Touchstone has a speech later where he talks about like the seven stages of lying and quarreling.
Oh, does he? I've never noticed that. I just find it funny as well as like having read Shakespeare loves this idea of like all the world's a stage. This is the most famous one, but he's got like numerous other ones where he does the exact same, and he even does the like first is the infant. He does like very similar variations, but he never quite fleshes it out to this same rhetorical degree. But it's just sort of interesting where it's like, yeah, you've done this one before. Like I wonder if the audience was watching, be like, oh God, he's on about this one again.
Yeah, but I think it's the seven stages which end on basically kind of nihilistic extermination.
Yeah.
But then Touchstone's one is he has these like uh the degrees of quarreling, which is like the retort, the quib, the reply, the reproof.
Oh, I do remember that.
Yeah, but there are also seven, and he kind of lists them out
Oh, I
seven in a
never noticed
way,
that.
yeah, that's similar to that speech. And he has kind of the later speech. It comes like Act 4 or 5, I think. And it was always like because Jake is so taken with Touchstone. When he meets Touchstone, that's the happiest he is in the play.
Yeah,
There
which is
seems,
also that's a great fool. I met a fool.
Mhm, yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a great speech.
hmm But there seems to be this kind of like the balance seems to be between Touchstone and Jaques more than Jaques or Rosalind. I think Rosalind is just of a different type than Jaques, and I think the fact that
Well,
she overdoes him is
I
evidence of that.
think that she's the balance between touch. You're not meant to be like Touchstone. Not
Yeah.
meant to be like Jake. You're meant to be like Rosalind. You're meant
hmm
to sort of be life affirming.
hmm
And I don't think either of them are meant to be. So the fact that Touchstone's the other one who has it, He's funnier, but he's a fool.
Mhm.
They're both fools. They're just
Mhm.
one's a somber fool and one's a merry fool, but they're both fools.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, she balances them out. Yeah, they're both opposites one another, and she sits in the middle and writes the world.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Um, yeah, but
we're
I
gonna talk about the movie. We're gonna get to the movie.
now we got to get to the movie, yeah, because it's getting late.
Yeah, it's getting late. We gotta
Um,
get to the movie.
yeah, so the movie. What did you think of the movie?
It's it's not bad. I was interesting because I know it gets bad. I've heard it got bad reviews, so I kind of was picturing a train wreck. It's not. I don't think anyway. It's it's just sort of slow, especially compared to say Midsummer. I mean, Midsummer is just boisterous and loud and fun and jolly and merry. It's a comedy. This is, but as you like it in general, is a more somber, reflective comedy. It's not a boisterous celebration of all things. There is this sense. Even I think Rosalind even has a monologue somewhere in there. It's not in the movie, but where she basically talks about the threat of dying in childbirth. There is sort of this love is dangerous, sort of sense to it. So it's definitely a more somber piece anyway. So the fact that this one is fairly slow and somber is fine. I don't necessarily mind that. The thing I don't necessarily like, I do feel like they kind of ruin Rosalind. She's
Yeah,
barely in it. She for Shakespeare's biggest female part. This is his biggest part he has for a woman. She's not all that present, and just a lot of the humor and just this kind of thing. There's like I love the one speech word between her and Celia when she says like, "Tell me who you saw, tell me all of it, tell me all in a word," and then Celia sort of they keep going back and forth because she keeps insisting that she tell her really quickly, and Celia just keeps saying, "Well, if you keep rushing me to say it, then I won't be able to say it." And there's sort of I like the banter, and all the banter's gone. Like there's very little of that. Even in Orlando and Rosalind's scenes, there's very little banter. So it's less joyful, it's less exuberant, but I don't think it's in any way a bad movie. I think it's actually like a fairly good adaptation of it. And I don't dislike the sort of Japanese setting either. Um, I think again it gives it a sense of gravitas, of sort of ancientness, of sort of I think it's actually works fairly well, I thought. I wouldn't call it a great movie or a great adaptation, but I enjoyed it.
yeah, I enjoyed it too. I agree with those points. I did not love Howard's Rosalind, both in
Who?
the Dallas Bryce Howard played Rosalind.
Oh, is that who that is?
Yeah, it's Ron
No, she's
Howard's
not.
daughter. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Mhm. Yeah, that's
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much of that is just the script. I mean, they don't give her much to do. She's not
yeah.
great, but the script just doesn't give her much. Again, for Shakespeare's biggest female role, she, she
Yeah,
doesn't, they didn't give her very much.
and cuts a lot out. I think though she plays it more. She plays it very kind of overwhelmed girl. There is a sort
Yeah,
of like girlishness to her, Rosalind.
which I think you can have in the beginning, but I think that she's supposed to mature a bit
Yeah,
too.
and she doesn't really, even in that kind of even by Act Four, she's still kind of playing that note. And so
They should have got the girl from Twelfth Night. She was great. They should have got her. I liked her.
what do you who is from 12th? Oh.
Twelfth Night.
Oh,
The actress that we saw from the movie we saw in the Twelfth Night movie.
yeah. Was
Amanda
it
Bynes. No, I'm kidding.
I
No,
first I thought you said Twilight instead of Twelfth Night.
no,
I thought you were joking, and I'm like,
yeah,
which?
the whatever. What
And
is
he's
her
like, yeah,
name?
and but you kept going. I'm like, did Kristen Stewart do As You Like? Did Kristen Stewart do a Shakespeare?
No,
Oh,
no, no. That would probably be really bad. No, the one who played the twelfth night. Though I liked her. I thought
mhm.
I would have her do the role. She should do the role.
Helena Bonham Carter or the other one?
No, the other one, the one who played
Yeah,
the
the
cross-dressing one. I think she
yeah,
could do it.
yeah. She would be pretty solid in it. Apparently, Katharine Hepburn was very good when she did it on stage.
Yeah.
That would be a really good casting if you had a young Katharine Hepburn. The first film version of it was from like 1912, and the actress was like 61. And apparently, reviewers were like, "We think 61 might be a bit old for
It might be.
Rosalind." Like, how old is her dad living in the woods? But yeah, yeah, she could pull it off. I
Well,
think
you
that
just
was
need someone. You need someone with a little more. Yeah,
a
I
little
don't
more.
think she, but I guess I don't think she's great, but I don't think it matters because again, I think the role's kind of neutered.
Yeah, yeah, he's more concerned with the ensemble. He's more concerned with the setting. He loves the setting. And I agree, even though it actually wasn't filmed in Japan, setting it in kind of colonial, or it's not really colonial, but British visiting Japan worked very well. And it does give it that kind of, yeah, give it that sense of mystery. Um, but of that, the kind of cast, the Woods, the sort of the people who you normally see wander into Kenneth Branagh films, like Brian Blessed,
Yeah,
and
I love
and
Brian Blessed, and
yeah,
this is probably his biggest role he gets in one of these.
yeah, we see him as the ghost of Hamlet's father, but I don't think that
Yeah,
role is quite as large
it's
as.
a very that's I mean it's a relatively small role, and you see him as like the Exeter. I think he plays Exeter, which is again he gets some good speeches in Henry V, but this is his most prominent role, I think.
And he's great.
He's great. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's really good.
he's really good. It's one of the things that I guess you would never learn in a playwriting or a script writing class is there seems to be no earthly reason why he should ever want to go back to the kingdom. I mean, he talks constantly, well, not constantly, but he has his first speeches all about why would we, he's Rousseau, why would we go
Yeah,
back into this civilization? That was terrible. Everything is great here. This is a state of nature speech. So you have this problem of like, why would he want to go back? If they like, why do we want him to go back? He doesn't want to go back. That seems like a terrible idea. But regardless, he's lovely in it.
yeah,
I think the actor who played now I'm forgetting his name, who played Leontes in Much Ado, who's Adam in this, is
yeah. I don't know his
is
name, but he was great. I didn't
great.
recognize him as the same actor. He's very good. He's
Mhm.
very good in this.
Yeah,
There's a lot of really good performances. I actually think Kevin Kline's pretty.
yeah,
I think he's good.
mhm.
Um, Alfred Molina's sort of meh. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. He's swinging for it a little bit. It's just it's hard to watch that character after seeing Ben Kingsley's Festi.
Yeah, I think
I think
that
that's
might be
part of it.
part of it.
Mhm.
Yeah, it just doesn't quite. And then maybe it's also because he's too Doc Ockish. Like I don't know. He's just like it's just something slightly odd about it. I don't know. I just don't think it. I just didn't get it. Not that I didn't get it. I just didn't buy it. Maybe it wasn't great. Um,
Audrey's wonderful though.
Audrey's really good.
She's really good. Yeah.
But yeah, she's actually. I am not a slut. Like it is like
That scene is, yeah,
that
really,
scene
really
is
funny.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, less what is it? I can't remember the lines, but yeah, it's like well, putting honesty in a beautiful woman is like. I think there's just some really
Yeah, yeah.
like
Hmm.
he just like he keeps calling her a slut.
Hmm.
It's just it's just very Shakespearean
Hmm.
comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's actually really good. Um, yeah, there's a lot of just a lot of great performances. That's the thing is like it's a lot of great performances and beautiful settings and it doesn't quite come together.
Hmm.
Like but it's
Because you don't,
nice.
yeah, you don't have the Rosalind at the center of it.
Yeah,
As
maybe
you're
that
saying,
is the
if you,
problem.
yeah, if your metaphor of Rosalind balances out these different, it's a humorous metaphor, right? She balances out these humors. That's her function in
Yeah.
this. And if you don't have, if you cut the roll down and you don't have a very compelling Rosalind, then almost by definition you don't have a very compelling Orlando because he's sort of a satellite of her in a lot of ways. And once
And
that,
that actor is fine.
and he's good,
He's
yeah.
fine, and I don't think he's a problem. I don't think anyone's. I guess it's like it's there's no one's a problem per se. Like I don't think Bryce Dallas Howard is a problem per se. I don't think she's great, but I don't think she's a problem. It's not like sometimes with some of the other ones where I'm like, oh my God, that person's irritating me. Like sometimes, and that happens a lot in Shakespeare. Like you just get someone who's like, Like they're not doing it right, or they're taking it too far, or they're Mickey Rooney, or they're just sometimes you just get the person in it. The
Sometimes you get Mickey Rooney.
Mickey Rooney. Sometimes you're just Mickey Rooney, and it's a big problem. But Much Ado has that. Like, there's just a couple. The Michael Keaton performance is just from fucking Mars
Mhm.
in that thing. Henry V doesn't really have a really problematic performance, but
No, I don't think so.
you do just sometimes get a performance where someone's just like, man, they are ruining this. And I don't think this has anybody who's that. There's no one in it who just ruins it. Um, but yeah, maybe it is the problem is Rosalind that there's no heart to it. But it's sort of a nice, it's almost a meditation-y kind of thing. Like I don't have a, it's not it's not the play. It's a different it's an adaptation. It's a totally different thing, but it's not a bad thing. It's just not a great thing.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to put it. Describe it as a meditation. I think he's kind of going for that
Yeah.
because it's really it seems like an unusually hard play to make into a movie. Of all of his comedies, that has to be the hardest. You could say that some of the other plays just aren't as high of quality, but this is
Of
the
the good
most
ones. Yeah, of the
still.
good ones.
Mhm. Of the good ones.
Because Twelfth Night, there's lots that happens, and there's
Mm,
lots of discussions, and they go back and forth, and there's
mm,
get you gone, and then he comes back, and then I sent him with my ring, and then they yell about the ring.
mm.
There's lots of drama. There's lots of things. Yeah, this just doesn't have that.
Yeah, you're waiting for Orlando to learn that Rosalind is Rosalind, but you don't really think that's going to be a problem when he
No.
discovers that, you
And
know.
even even the thing with, Phoebe, it's sort of like, what? This feels random. This
Yeah.
doesn't, this
Mm.
just feels like, with the Duchess falling in love in Twelfth Night. Is she a Duchess? Whatever she is.
Oh yeah, whatever she is, I don't know.
I don't think she's a Duchess. Whatever she is.
Mm.
When she falls,
Olivia, right?
yeah, when she falls in love, you sort of are like, oh yeah, this is like, of course that's what's going to happen. This is, it's a big plot element. This is a major character, and there's lots of things, and there's opportunities for now misconceptions and misunderstandings. And oh, okay, yeah, this totally makes sense. But at this point, I'm like, why is this here? We're
Mm.
like 3 acts in before we even met this person.
Yeah,
Um,
I think my feeling is it's there so that Shakespeare can do the thing where the three of them are yelling and Rosalind just goes,
yeah.
and I love no
No
woman.
man, well, no, yeah, and no woman for me. Yeah, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love no woman. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of
I think they're there so he could pull that scene off.
it feels like, and I don't know if they were still, like if they were doing like the apprenticeship writing at this point, that there was just sort of a like, okay, we need the apprentice writer to write a few scenes. Just tell him to go do that sequence. He can go do the pun sequence
Mm.
about the gender thing. Have him go do that. And then he just went he just went off and came back and was like, "Did I do a good job?" And they're like, "Yeah, it's good enough. Put it in the play." And then they like it I would like to
John Fletcher wrote this.
yeah, I would like to know if that's how that ended up in there. Was just okay, the apprentice needs to write some scenes. Yeah, we need the intern. The intern's going to contribute to the PowerPoint. So
My,
he's gonna write this. He's gonna write this scene.
yeah, my feeling it's probably more like, oh crap, we have blah 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 actor and he's pissed. We gotta
Yeah.
give blah 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 actor something to do. Or it was like, oh, this needs to be 3 hours. This is the like, oh no, my paper is only 1,700 words and it needs to be 2,000. I'm gonna talk about the methods of this study for
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like
yeah.
that. I got the impression too. Yeah.
So what I used to always do in those circumstances, I would write very long footnotes. It's, it's like no one really is reading the footnotes, and you could easily just put like a footnote in there and be like, and just kind of babble away for a little bit in your footnotes, and just on a totally random. You don't have to actually integrate it into your paper, and it can just be a total opinion that has no relevance to the rest of
Yeah.
the paper.
I never had
And
the.
that can usually bump you onto that 10th page if you do that 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, I never had the. I always wrote too much, so it's like, oh, everybody who gets my papers initially are like, oh, God, it's. But anyway, yeah, maybe that's why that's there. But yeah, I don't,
But
I,
it's a good scene though.
mm,
It's not like it doesn't feel like it's yeah, you could totally airlift it out and
mm,
the play would still be basically the same.
mm,
But they're well written little
mm,
sequences. Like it's still funny. It's funny to watch the shepherd. I think he's also mocking pastorals
mhm.
and the idea of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
shepherd in love. And I think
Mm,
he's mocking that
mm.
form, but everything in it, but to your point, like, how do you make a movie of it? It's just there's nothing.
Yeah.
There's very little drama. He even amps up the drama to sort of make it look like
Oh,
the
the
evil brother and blessed
ninjas,
it is
yeah.
black. Yeah, and the ninjas and the assassins coming through. It's sort of like, yeah, I mean, this isn't. I mean, I guess it sort of helps to set the tone, but it's not really necessary. But it's sort of like he's trying to sort of inject drama into it anyway, and it doesn't need to be there. But he's got to do something. What else are you gonna do? There's
Yeah. Yeah, nothing happens. I mean, it's a sort of
nothing
Tempest
happens.
problem too. But it's, yeah, I think
But
I actually,
Tempest has the people running around and they
mm,
get lost, and the
mm,
fairies are leading them astray, and you've got the angry Caliban. Like you can sort of, it's got enough sort of fantastical qualities that you can up it and make it that.
yeah. Yeah,
I don't
I
know.
think
Maybe
Tempest
maybe
has
when we do, are we
more.
doing Tempest? We're doing Tempest
We
the
are
last one. We're
Tempest
doing
last, I think.
last. So it's sort of like I've never seen a movie of Tempest, but I don't think I've ever even seen a performance of Tempest. But the I think there's enough there to kind of flashy it up a bit. This
Mm,
just doesn't have that.
yeah.
Like, how much can you flashy up Jaques? There's
Mm,
just it doesn't. I wonder if it has anyone done a good performance of this
a
in
good movie of it? I'm sure
movie,
they've
not
done, yeah.
performance, but movie.
Yeah. There's the Olivier version from the 30s, but I've seen it and it's also pretty. And the reason why you watch it is to see Olivier.
Yeah. Who does
But
he play? Does he play Orlando?
Orlando,
Yeah.
yeah, he's very young in it. I think it's the reason to watch it though is to just watch the cavalcade of characters. They're good
Yeah.
characters.
That's why you watch it. Yeah.
You watch it. You like to see them bounce off each other, um,
Someone
and
should
that's
do this
it.
like a 20 like a short videos kind of thing. Like what is that? 22 short films kind of thing. Like it almost has
Oh,
that.
32 short films of As You
Yeah.
Like It.
Yeah,
Yeah,
whatever. Yeah, it's just
yeah.
it's sort of it's like, okay, well we had Jake We's talk to the Duke, we've had Jake We's talk to Touchstone. Now let's have Jake We's talk to Orlando. Now let's have Jake We's talk to
To
Rosalind.
Rosalind. Yeah,
Now let's have
32 short
Touchstone
films
talk to
of.
Rosalind. Now we'll have
Hmm.
Touchstone talk to Orlando. Now we'll have Touchstone talk to the Duke. Now we'll have there's just this like
Yeah, that's
this
true.
four factorial of scenes where we're just gonna take each
Mhm.
character and put them around.
Uh-huh. Yeah, but it's my favorite.
It's still,
It's
I'm
a
not saying, but it
really
is a
good
good
play. Yeah,
play. It is
yeah.
a really good
Mm.
play, and it's just this isn't into this one kind of breaks my theory of it maybe to some extent because I was saying that like, I've never seen it other than the performance we did of it in the movie. But my what I'm realizing more as I read them is that like the comedies in general they're fun to read, but they tend to be better in performance. Like they just watching them, you get a lot of nuance you don't get. They tend to just be funnier. You can often see bad performances of them and they're still good because the jokes are still funny. Like they kind of work. The tragedies tend to work better as pieces of literature because the performances are really hard, I think, because if they're bad, they're really bad. So it's really hard to pull off the tragedies really well. They tend to be better when you read them, whereas the comedies oftentimes are the opposite. They tend to be not as good when you read them and better when you see them. This is maybe in between them. Like it works really well as a piece to read and it's really interesting and entertaining and it's still a good movie, but it's not as good as like it's just it doesn't have as much sort of just boisterous fun as Midsummer or these other ones. So it's almost in between those two. It's got a little bit of both.
Yeah, yeah. That's a really good point. That the tragedies. I think this is especially true with Hamlet. I have a lot easier time reading Hamlet than watching it, even though I
Watching
do
it, yeah.
enjoy the Kenneth Branagh film a lot. I think that play is much more enjoyable to read. And Yeah, maybe Macbeth might be an exception, but
Macbeth is a little bit of an exception because
it's
Macbeth
also
is
really,
just
really short.
it's short and it's just sort of it,
There's witches.
which is I mean like it's just it sort of has
There's
this
ghosts. They
yeah, there's
murder
ghosts and there's
people. Yeah.
murders and there's witches and just like how could you not want to watch this? And
Yeah.
you got this man murdering his way to the top. How could you not want to watch that?
Yeah.
Um, and I've seen a very good production of Lear. I did see a very good production of Lear, but it's Lear is beautifully written. I think it might be his best written. It might not be his best drama because again, it suffers from the problem of like in like the second, third, fourth act, like very little happens other than them trying to get Lear to go to bed. Like, spend a very long time trying to get him to go to sleep, and he doesn't want to. So it's not a lot of drama.
Yeah.
Like, but I think it's his best
Mhm.
written. Like
Mhm.
it's his most poetic.
It's his
Some of the
most pathos-inducing.
yeah, it's just there's a lot of really beautiful, beautiful writing in there. Um, and when it's well done, I think it's beautifully done. Um, so I do think there's something interesting with the tragedies that I think they often have a less they're less with the exception maybe of Macbeth, but and again even Othello it's sort of like you can sort of watch his Iago's sort of unfolding of his plot. There is sort of a plot to it. It has a certain level of drama. But yeah, Hamlet like nothing happens.
Yeah. And
And that's
Hamlet's
fine, and it's a beautifully written play, but as a piece of drama, it's less compelling.
Mhm. Yeah, it's odd. It seems as if that I guess this is something we see in silent films to more modern films. Is in the early days of silent films, they are doing a ton of stuff. It's really bizarre. We would think of it as highly experimental, and then later they kind of figure out a standard or a formula. That seems to be going on here because you think like we think of the early modern world as this ancient tradition or this very old tradition. They've only been doing this since like the 1560s.
Yeah.
It's been around like 30 years. This is sort of their silent film era. And so they're doing things that that you couldn't do in a playwriting book. Like a playwriting book, this violates a lot of those rules. And I
Well,
think
that's
that's
the like. There was some play I remember reading recently. It was like a short play, and it was like Shakespeare Hamlet, Shakespeare workshops Hamlet.
Mhm.
And it was basically just like all these people being like, "I'm not really sure about the ghost character. Could we do without the ghost?" And you just see him take notes and be like, "Yeah, but it's sort of like a main plot point." And they'll be like, "I think we could get that information more succinctly." And then it's the like, I don't understand. Like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, these characters seem interchangeable. I think we need to make the play more about them. I'm more interested in hearing about them. Could we sort of move? But I need to see Shakespeare's like taking notes as they keep just giving him all this information. He's like, oh God, like none
Yeah,
of these, but it's true. It's just like, yeah, a lot of these things are just they wouldn't pass muster in a in
it
a
wouldn't be.
in
Yeah,
a in a script writing class.
yeah. And other early modern plays have kind of more dynamic action sequences or something. Like the Spanish tragedy is very, very rich in action. But he's not that interested in action.
No, and
It's not
that's
his thing. Yeah.
no, and that's fine. But I just think that might be partially why this one is fairly difficult, unless you just you got to be really good to pull it off. Unlike the other comedies, where you know, it's funny to watch the woman, think that it's a man. Like that's funny.
Mhm.
It's funny to watch, Puck mess up. It's funny to watch Beatrice and Bennett. There's just sort of like there's an easy access level that you can do on them that this one just doesn't have, that the tragedies don't generally have either, for the most part. And so that might be why this one is very difficult to adapt uh, because and even just perform. It's very difficult. As a piece of literature, I would agree. I think it might be his best. I think Twelfth Night might still be my favorite. As I always say, I think Ulysses might be one of the best books ever written. It's not my favorite.
Yeah.
Like, I will recognize its quality, but it's
Mhm.
not my favorite.
Yeah.
This might be his best comedy, but it's not my favorite.
Yeah, maybe it's I think it is probably my favorite.
Yeah.
But this is not by far my favorite movie we've
No.
watched, I think. Any closing thoughts?
Now we're on to the sad stuff.
No, Ness. Now we're on to the sad stuff. We're on to Macbeth. But let's close this out before we introduce that. If you enjoyed As You Like It, check out the 1912 silent film starring a 61-year-old woman as Rosalind. There is the 1936 Paul Zenaire film with Laurence Olivier as Orlando. We have the 1991 British film with Christine Izzard uh, as Rosalind, and that's it. Sorry, I thought I had another one there, audience. Just those. Don't look for anything else. You can rate and review this show anywhere fine podcasts are available. For those viewing in YouTube land, if you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the Talking Studios channel for all our exciting content, and follow us on social media at Talking Studios. Check out other shows by Talking Studios, including Talking Pictures Trivia, where we explore movies through trivia, Keep Making Movies, where we explore micro-budget films, Limited Lexicon, where we play through text-based adventure games, and Get the Point, where we slowly reveal a movie poster and try to guess which movie poster it is. Got a question for us? Call the Talking Studios hotline at 201-467-8679 and leave a message. It may be featured on a future episode. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Adapt It, wherever fine podcasts are found. Join us next time when we move into the tragedies and discuss Macbeth. We'll discuss the play, Kurosawa's Throne of Blood, Roman Polanski's Macbeth, and Scotland, PA, starring Christopher Walken.
Wow, Talking Studios.
Next week, we'll be discussing Macbeth. Pat, if you could play one role in this play, what would it be?
What would it be? I would like to be one of the witches, I think, personally.
Oh, that would be fun.
I think I would have a lot of fun with that. When we get to them next week, I particularly enjoyed Andy Dick as one of the witches, but one of Andy Dick's least annoying roles. I actually enjoyed that. But the whom would I probably be
Who
cast
would you
as?
want to? Yeah, who would you want to play, or who would you want to be cast as, or both?
I would say the witches, but like what would I probably get? I'd probably get the dude at the gate that just does the penis jokes.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
that's
the
probably what I
Porter
would
speech.
get. Yeah, I'd get that awful Porter speech, and I would have to do like all the dick jokes.
Equivocate.
Yeah, it gives him the lust and takes away the performance. I'm like every time I see that, it's just like. Although I think the what's his name? Blanking on his name. Not Scorsese.
Oh,
One that we did.
Roman Polanski.
Polanski. The Polanski one. I feel like that was one of the better Porter speeches in that it was just relatively subdued and quick. But I feel like there's a tendency to dwell on the Porter
Porter's
speech.
speech.
So I would probably get that just because I would be forced to then milk it by some director and I would just be angry at it.
Yeah, I think the Porter speech that comes to mind is in the Ian McKellen version, the guy who plays the Emperor from Star Wars does it.
Palpatine?
Palpatine, yeah, he does
Oh,
the
that
Porter
dude.
speech in the Ian McKellen Judi Dench version.
It's an odd
Um,
casting.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it is what it is. It's the standard Porter speech. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's the one I always remember because I'm like, oh, it's Palpatine.
What about you? What would you?
What about me? Um, God, I'd probably be Macduff again.
You'd be a good Macduff.
I'd be a
I
good
was thinking that. You'd be
Macduff.
a
I
good
think
Macduff.
that would be a good role for me. Um, you know, I tend to get cast as big guy who can do damage. That's Macduff.
I mean, it's kind of Macbeth too, but
It's kind of Macbeth too. Yeah, I suppose Macbeth would be. That would be a good of all these, of like the four great tragedies, that would probably be the better leading role for me out of all of them.
Yeah, I mean, I mean Othello, but you just couldn't do it.
Yeah,
And
maybe more of an
probably,
Othello, but
aside from the obvious problems, that actually would be a good role for you, I think.
yeah.
But I don't. I would not advise accepting any
Except,
casting. I would not advise that.
yeah. Well,
Um,
there's certain makeup you could use, but
yes,
I,
exactly. This is why I would not advise
yeah,
it.
but I think
So if anybody
Macbeth,
tries to cast you in that role, I would turn it down.
yes.
However, no, I think Macbeth probably would be it would of the four. You're right. I think that would be the one most suited to your talents. But
Yeah, otherwise it would be Macduff. Yes, yeah. Just big guy, does damage, looks good, ends play. That was my career as an actor.
that's essentially weren't we going to cast you as Richmond anyway? Did you get cast as Richmond or not?
You got cast as Richmond,
No, I know, but
literally.
but when we were discussing this, whom
Oh,
did we
I
cast you
think
as?
no, no, no. I think I was who was I? Was I Buckingham? No, I
Oh,
was
you.
Clarence.
Oh yeah, that was a
Because
good.
I
Yeah,
actually was
that actually would be
cast. Yeah.
good casting. Okay, fine.
Yeah, I was
Um,
cast as Clarence. I couldn't do it though. That was just whatever the circumstance was.
Yeah,
But
so
yeah.
so you basically get cast as good-looking guy who gets to solve the problems, and I'm repeatedly getting cast as the drunk who makes penis jokes.
Well, you were actually cast as Richmond, who's good-looking guy who solves the biggest problem.
Yes, but that was 20 years ago. It's not. I would not be cast as Richmond now.
Yeah.
Now I would be cast as Bardolph, and then like, oh no, then Richard the Third. I'd
Yeah.
probably be cast as like the 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 cardinal who has to go get the strawberries.
Oh, the
The arch the
strawberries.
strawberries. I would get cast as that.
Mhm.
That would be my casting.
Oh, there you
All
go.
right. Now that we've reminisced, weren't you in Macbeth? You were in Macbeth, weren't you?
Was I in? I don't even
You were in that
remember.
production,
Was I in
the Shakespeare in
Macbeth?
the Park. Weren't you in that? Didn't you play Banquo?
No. No, I
I
was in
thought you were
Richard
in
the
that one.
Third.
Oh, I thought you were in the Macbeth too.
Not that I remember, though.
Oh,
It's been so
okay.
long that I could have lost that memory.
For some reason, I thought you were in that one, but I don't
No.
remember because I didn't even get to see the whole thing when I saw that. That was a Shakespeare in the Park, and again, that was almost 20 years ago. I thought you were in that one, but I went to go see it, and it was really cool. But I didn't get to see the end of it because there was like a huge lightning storm in in the middle of the second act, and it was like really cool because it was like right when the ghost came out. It was like the banquet scene, and it was like,
Oh.
and it was you could see this lightning bolts all in the distance. I'm like, oh man, this is cool. This is cool. And it was the same night, just randomly, some dude was practicing bagpipes there in
Mhm.
this park, and he was probably
Oh.
like a mile away, but he's like practicing bagpipes playing during this as there's like lightning bolts. I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool.
Yeah. That sounds neat. No, I was not in that production.
Okay, so never
Wish
mind.
I
I thought you were
was.
in that one, but
Yeah. Yeah, well. Maybe one day.